So I was gonna put it out there, ask you guys what you think plotmanship means. So maybe I'll just call out names. Gabriel?
Okay, in my own perspective, plotmanship is when all the management of the plot or the field is being probably planned accordingly, and everybody involved in each process is being carried along down from the management team to the least person involved in the process. So to me, that's what I consider as good plotmanship, because by doing so, then you are you will get your result at the end of the day.
Okay, good. Pass on to the wise man.
Look at the functional words. Good, plot, manship. It starts from land allocation. If you allocate an upland to plant a paddy rice, you are starting on a wrong note. So for me, good plotmanship starts from the identification of the right land for the crop, or through the process of caring for the crop, the land preparation, the planting, the weeding, data taking, harvesting, and everything up until you conclude. It has to be precise. It has to be correct. That's what makes for a good plotmanship.
That's great. Yeah. Pass on to my brother from the rice program there. It would be nice to get the perspective from.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the wise man have said it, said it all. So, yeah, so it's all about good agronomic practices. So I think they have summarized it well.
Okay, good. I'd like to hear from a breeder's point of view, Lenin.
Okay. In terms of good plotmanship, basically we are saying it's application of the standard operating procedures, good agronomic practices, such that there is precise or correct data that is obtained from the bid, the trial, or nursery.
Yeah, it's good. Thanks. So anyway, yeah, when yeah, it's actually that's oh, I'm looking at this. It actually, like, you guys have provided the responses, and this is my way of thinking as well. Like I think Gabriel said, I mean, it starts from the protocol, right? If you start with a well-written protocol, because that's the set of instructions that you're following, and then of course your standard operating procedures in establishing the plots. Francis talked about site selection. That's really important, that we start with a good site before we implement the trials or nurseries, and of course agronomic practices and proper field maintenance. So yeah, it looks like we are all on the same page. Next. So starting with site selection, this can make or break an experiment, right? If the trial is allocated in the wrong area of the field, like we should be managing the effects of variability in the field properly to minimize the impact on the trial. Other thing that we should be looking at when we are selecting the site is the accessibility and visibility of the trials. Factors that could affect the site selection, things like soil variability. So if you know at least the soil history, you know your land, you know where to you should be putting plots or not. Of course, site topography and gradient. And in our case, as you can see, this Ibadan is the topography is undulating. So it can be a little bit challenging to find the right spots to set up the trials. Site drainage, like you should avoid areas where there is standing water, of course, access and the weeds that are established on the site. So variability, of course, that's invariably not uniform. So which means, again, you have to examine the field properly before, or rather You have to examine the area before you set up the trials to ensure that you minimize variability in the field. And factors that are going to affect soil variability are things like texture, permeability, subsoil, salinity, and of course the crop history. What was there before, and in the chemistry and the pH and organic matter. So topography, like I said, a good case, of course, is Ibadan. Gradient is going to affect the fertility and the moisture. In general, the higher land is going to will be more fertile than the lower land, or vice versa. And you also have maybe water is flowing down, so you're going to have pools of water at the bottom of the slope. So you should watch out for that. And of course, topography is going to affect mechanization. Some of the equipments that we are getting, like the combines, may have high center of gravity, so you should avoid areas that are tilting that maybe could cause the combine to topple. Of course, avoid go back. Avoid nose and sloughs, of course, like hills. You can set up trials on hills or sloughs where there is standing water. Undulating fields, you should avoid that. Of course, flat land is the best, but Ibadan, that's very tough to find. Next slide. So some of the factors, of course, we said that to affect the plotmanship is agronomic practices, starting from field preparation. Try to minimize the soil, minimize soil disturbance as much as possible, and manage the plant residue, because that's going to impact soil retention and maybe also help with weed management. Crop rotation is something to keep in mind. This is something that I've been actually talking about since I came here. We have a tendency to follow plots. We superimpose plots after plots. Like last year, we had in one field behind our houses there. We've had the year when I came, they had corn. Then the following year, those were plots. Then the following year, they had soybean. And then the following year, they had maize again. So there's no break in between when you're having trials. And so what happens is, think of it this way. The first year when you have plots, you have maize, right? You have maize plots. Like each one of these varieties has got different nitrogen use efficiency, right? The architecture is different. So it's going to mine different amounts of nitrogen every year. So the following year, when you come in and you plant soybean again there, you've already introduced pockets of variability. So the idea should be from there, you should have at least 1 year where you rest the field. You just have a monocrop. Maybe if it was maize, you can just grow soybean, just one crop. Mine out all those differences as much as possible. In fact, what we used to do is we used to live like 3 years from here before we can come back in with plots. So you leave at least some space in time before you can go back. Otherwise, you just exposing your trials to variability. So next slide. Fertility is one thing that we should be watching out for, of course. It should be based on actual plant needs and not, yesterday I posed a question to you guys, how do you fertilize your fields? And most of you are saying, well, the agronomists have done the work and we're just following that. But really, what we're doing here is a little more precise. So you should actually be testing the fields. I know some people will say it's too much. Like where I'm coming from, we used to do that every year. Before we set up the trials, we'll test the fields for fertility. So avoiding things like that. And then, of course, what's the plant need, right? So we are matching what the plant needs and what's in the soil. And of course, then seeding. Lenin yesterday talked about germination. Make sure that you do germination tests and pay attention to seed treatment and inoculation. And of course, watch the seeding dates that are recommended so that you are not outside the window that will optimize the plant growth. Then seeding depth, especially in the dry parts of the year. You should, if you are not using irrigation, watch out when you are seeding. At least you're seeding in a moist. The depth actually the seed is sitting in moisture. Next slide. And then weeds. That's another factor that's going to impact your plots. So make sure that at least you're familiar with the weeds at your farm, because that's going to determine what kind of herbicide you're going to use. So is it broadleaves? Is it grasses? Are they perennial or annuals? So that's depending on what crop you're going to grow, that's going to have an impact. And of course, have some knowledge in terms of herbicide mode of action that you are using. This is important, especially when we are managing weed resistance. We can use tank mixes to ensure that we slow down weed resistance, so that we are not relying on one mode of action from year to year. And of course, the pace, if you understand what their life cycle is and the horse economic ratios, and that's why it's important that we are following rotation, so that we are breaking up that life cycle. We are not using the same horse over and over. Okay, next slide. Same for disease, they soil borne or is it folio? How you are managing the residue can also have an impact on the diseases. And the fungicides, are they seed treatment or is it folio? Of course, follow the label. Then irrigation, try to do some water budgeting. And Amir spoke about this, where we should actually pay attention to what's in the soil and what the crop needs. So we are not just supplying unnecessary. The water quality, from time to time, we should be actually testing the water that we are using for irrigation. And then we should try and match the irrigation to the weather data, and that's something that we are moving towards. And of course, drainage, pay attention to the drainage in the fields. Next slide. So the field layout, how do you lay out the field to reduce the effect of spatial variability? This is where you have to pay attention to the area before you set up your trials. And one thing I noticed here, we are doing a trial for the maize as just a demo. We had a field. What about my artistry here? We had a field that. Okay, is it offending your? Oh, I like bright stuff. So anyway, so we had a field, I'm exaggerating the slope here, but we had a field that was like that, right? This is the slope. The gradient is probably exaggerated, like I say. So I went there with the maize technician and I said, so how would you lay the trials, the blocks? And he said, well, we seed in this direction, so our blocks go this way, right? So block 1, 2, 3, 4. So those are like the reps. So what's wrong with that picture? Like, I'll throw it out here for those who are scientists. What's that?
I think for the blocks, normally they should be, where there's a gradient, it should be across the slope.
Yeah. Yeah, so what's happening is this variety, if there are varieties in this block 1, variety 1, variety 2, variety 3, 4. So this might perform better because maybe the nutrients have accumulated there, right? It's performing better than that, not necessarily because it's a better variety. So to remove that variability, you should, like Lenin is saying, the blocks should be running that way. So your plots are that way, right? So all the varieties in this rep are subjected sort of kind of same conditions. So those are things that we need to pay attention to, right? So you block against the gradient slope of fertility if you know where how the fertility the fertility gradient is. So you avoid extreme areas like low spots, hills, like I said before. And now that we're moving to mechanized operations, the one thing we need to pay attention to is the pathways. So when you're setting up your trial. So if this is rep 1, right? Rep 2, these things seem obvious, but they are not. So rep 1 there, make sure that you leave enough room there for the tractor to drive through, so that if you're doing any maintenance, you're spraying, the boom at least can go halfway there. You can spray up and down. Don't make them too tight where you can't drive in with the tractor. So it's just good practice. Then of course use guardrails, and then sometimes, I mean, not sometimes, most of the time, or all the time, since we're using equipment, they pay attention to the perimeter. So if say you're seeding this way, up and down, you're using a tractor, you need enough room there to turn, right? So you have to make sure that you leave enough room on the edges so that the tractor can turn around. Okay. So, okay, next slide. Then just field layout when you're setting up the trial. For me, I like my trials to be like really precise, all the angles to be right. If you go to our fields here, you see that most of our fields are like das, or we following the contour, right? And for a good reason, that's the way the ridges are set up. But I like to set up my trials, make sure that I start with the right angle. And it's just a question of using, like when we set up with John, all we did was I just had a rope like here. I did like 3 meters there, another rope, stake here, 3 meters, 4 meters, and then I did a 5 meter here. So we were able to establish a right angle, and then it was all square. But you can also use a prism. There are prisms that you can use that to line things up, or use a GPS system. Also make sure that the plots are marked properly, and you can see what's going on there, labeled properly. We are now moving to bar-coded stakes. I think all the programs are moving in that direction. We went to the cassava plots, and it's done very well. So next slide. Sorry?
It's the 3, 4, 5. One side. Just following that.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Fix for just lining the plot.
Yeah. And I've used this since I was a student. So next slide. So I don't know if I should leave this question for the afternoon. Any of these questions we start? Okay, yeah, please. Yeah.
The common feature that normally affects most trial locations, especially where they use equipment like tractors, harrows, plows,
Yeah.
is when they just move the plow from one field to the other without even cleaning it. There are some weeds which are very problematic. Nutsedge, for example, couch grass, for example.
Yeah.
You are better confining it to where you know this is the problematic field. You clean your equipment before you move it there. Just taking it there, you're basically spreading the weed across all your station.
Yeah.
So it's a major issue in most stations. They don't, most of the implement operators, they don't take that into account. They just move across.
Yeah. Actually, we had that problem in AFC. We developed a protocol. There is a disease, club root. It affects canola. So, and the way it's transmitted normally is through equipment. So anybody who was coming to the station, they had to sign like a form to say that they've actually cleaned their equipment and vehicles before they came to the station. Also, any external vehicle is not allowed in the farm. So they will come to the offices, and then we'll provide transportation for them. So you can use that same thought process to weed management, as you are saying. So, sorry, yeah, soil, exactly. Yeah. So,
Weeds also sprayers that
yeah.
Has looking at droplet sizes, wind direction, wind conditions, all these things.
Those factors, yeah.
I mean, even wind still conditions have issues if the droplet size is not right.
Yeah.
Because they hang in the air. they
Yeah,
move.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And then calibration of the sprayer, just all those things, I guess.
Yeah, I guess we probably need just a whole session on that one. Just, but the other thing is, Amir, did you have something to say? Sorry. Oh no. Oh yeah, go ahead.
For those fields that are problematic, that have that are problematic here in EiB-IITA to actually be out of use for some time, because you realize that at the end of the day, they increase the cost of maintaining a particular trial. We have few of them there that one of our technicians will call those weeds meet me tomorrow, because as he's weeding them out today, he's finding them fully grown there the next day. So I don't know if whether we can actually stop using those plots and to allow them to heal, or probably to find something to, control the kind of weeds there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where diligence comes in, not only from Wilson's point of view, but from the breeders, from the technician. Again, that's the old model. I think things will change. But what I've observed is that once you guys are done, the technicians, once the breeding programs, once you're done with the field, you just leave it like that. Like you leave the sticks, the weeds, and everything. Partly, of course, it's because of this chargeback. People don't want to pay for the service, so they would rather just leave the field, and then it's up to Wilson to look after. And the problem with that is that when you leave weedy plots after you're done with them, the seed is spreading to the neighboring fields. Then it's affecting everybody downstream. So it should be everybody's responsibility. When you're in charge of that plot, make sure that when you leave it, at least before you leave it, maybe apply some glyphosate or something to get rid of the weeds, so that the next program that comes in there, they find it weed free. So we have to work together.
Alex, sometimes it's a blessing in disguise, Maybe it will give you an opportunity to actually try some selective trials on these under these conditions. But no, leave joking aside. The question is, okay, so in certain areas or certain trials, okay, you need to inoculate, okay, certain pathogens, okay, even in open field.
Yeah.
So how would you manage the rotation afterwards? How would you manage that?
So again, that's where you come in with that monocrop to break up that the inoculant. So like you need those breaks. It's same as the weeds, the herbicide, everything. You need to break it up. Like I'm a strong proponent of breaking up the cycle with the monocrop. Go ahead, boss.
Normally, even if it's not a research station, even on commercial farms, there's a cycle which normally runs for something like 5 years.
Yeah.
Where they put a cycle continuously to say, after maize, you don't get any cereal after that for the next 2 seasons.
Yes. Yeah,
basically, you are breaking the cycle for diseases, this build up of the seed bank for weeds, among other things.
Yeah.
So probably that cycle is required even at a research station to say it should be well documented that regardless of what researchers want, they should follow that cycle.
Yeah.
Because I know there are specific scientists who prefer specific fields.
Yeah.
They will tell you, I don't want anything else. I want that corner. But there's build-up of diseases. There's build-up of weeds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's need for that cycle to be there.
Yeah. I mean, there are special cases like Striga, where we probably might not have a choice, but yeah, in most cases, I think we can do that.